One of my favorite images from modern telescopes is something called the deep field or the ultra deep field. This is an image taken of the universe looking out in a direction where there really aren't any nearby stars to drown out the image. And by just collecting light for days and days, the resulting image shows you the faintest things in the distant sky. And what you see in this tiny little swath of sky about the size of looking through a soda straw kind of thing is thousands of galaxies, these smudges of light. And each of these little smudges of light is actually a gravitationally bound collection of billions of stars. Our own Milky Way galaxy, in which our sun resides, would look like one of those if you were at one of the other galaxies looking back. And then you imagine this extrapolated over the whole sky. There are, in fact, hundreds of billions of galaxies in our observable universe, and in each one of them, billions upon billions of stars. So these numbers are just hard for us to comprehend. And when we think about, as you say, our seeming insignificance as being residents of a planet orbiting one little star in the outskirts of one of these galaxies, it just seems like we really don't have significance. And in a sense, that's true, right? If our significance is based on being central, then we learned quite a long time ago that we're not the center of anything. We're not the center of the solar system. Our Earth is not, the solar system is not in the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and our galaxy is not in the center of the universe. In fact, doesn't seem to be a center of the universe at all. So does that mean we are insignificant? I think significance can come from different ways of looking at things. That's a philosophical question, not a science question. Even the psalmist in the Bible who wrote Psalm 8 was talking about how when he looked at the heavens, and to the psalmist that meant the moon and the stars, he said, what are we? What is mankind? What are humans that you are mindful of us, or mortals that you, O Lord, would care about us? Had that same sense of insignificance. But then the psalmist went on and said, and yet, you've given us dominion. You've placed us just a little lower than angels. In other words, God has given us significance. And the psalmist knew that dominion did not mean that he could go to the stars and the moon and do something to them, but rather it was contemplation and understanding. And so I view the fact that we can look at the stars, look at the heavens, and even have scientific understanding of them as a gift from God, and a sign that we have significance in that way, that we can recognize our connection to the universe, understand some of its meaning. And I would view science as a part of that dominion, that gift that we've been given, that gives us significance. For Christians, our significance is a gift of God, and that He's shown us that He loves us and wants us to have a personal relationship with God. Mm-hmm. So we can see significance in different ways.
So taking that maybe just one step further even, what do you think of the current models and theories around multiverse theory, and the idea that perhaps we're not even the only universe in the world, let alone the center of the universe that we can see? What do you think about that from a scientific perspective, and how do you reflect on that as a Christian?
Sure. So this is the idea that our whole universe that we see and experience, all the galaxies full of stars, and now we think maybe full of planets too, and all the physical forces that kind of govern the way the universe works in terms of physical nature, that this is just one collection of energy and matter and forces, that there might be many other universes that had their own beginnings and have their own history and importantly, their own perhaps different types of physical forces that might have made them turn out very different than our own. And so the idea is that there might be many, many other universes. In fact, maybe in some constructs, the idea is there might be an infinite number of other universes. So we call this the multiverse. Now, this is an interesting theory. It's based on some mathematical models and some theories we refer to under the umbrella of string theory and other types of offshoots of physics and mathematics. But these other universes are not observable. So that's kind of why this whole realm of discussion typically stays within the realm of theory and hypothesis, because there's no way I can point a telescope and see if there's another universe outside our own. Just kind of by definition, we can't. There are some ideas that maybe if these universes interact in some interesting ways, that you might be able to see some evidence of that in fundamental particles in our own physical universe. So far, that hasn't been seen. So it's more of a theoretical idea, but what it does is opens the possibility that maybe the fact that our universe seems kind of perfectly situated for complex life, the physical forces that govern our universe seem to be, in some people's words, they would say finely tuned for atoms and molecules to develop, that gravity is not too strong or too weak, so that in just the right amount of time we could have stars coalescing out of the initial atoms that formed in the universe, that those stars could then produce heavier elements that enabled subsequent generations of stars to have solid planets and even the building blocks of life, and so that we could have complex carbon molecules that enable us to have complex living creatures such as you and myself. This would be very different in a different universe with different forces. Maybe none of those things would be in play and you couldn't have complex life. So maybe the life in our own universe is basically basically an accident of statistics, you know. Well, that gets us back into the philosophical question of, you know, does it mean that we are insignificant even if there are a whole bunch of other universes that don't have life and we're just the lucky one that does? You still have to ask the philosophical question of, well, why are there the fundamental setups that would allow these universes to form in the first place? Some kind of quantum fields that allow universes to burst off here and there. That would be, in my view, very cool. And so you still have to ask the philosophical question of, you know, why is there something and not nothing? All of us kind of have, I hope, a sense of awe and wonder when we look at the universe. I certainly still have it, even after working in this field for decades. There's never a time when an image of a galaxy or a beautiful nebula that's being lit up by newly formed stars just doesn't thrill me and give me a sense of amazement. More specifically, how do we look at what we now understand as the history of the universe? I think the pretty much the consensus scientific view that I share from looking at the data we have from different kinds of telescopes is that our universe has not always been the same. That this universe we're in at least had a burst of energy about 13.8 billion years ago, and into this inflating, fastly expanding space, this energy was filled that space, and as the universe cooled, as it rapidly expanded, the energy was able to convert into the early, what we would call matter. Atoms and subatomic particles were able to form, and then over a time, eventually the radiation from the early universe was able to travel freely, and we can even see this background radiation now. Every direction we look, we see what we call the cosmic microwave background radiation. And that's basically, for scientists, a proof, if you will, or very strong evidence that our universe had an energetic beginning. It's not been in steady state. It's not just kind of been ambling along in the same way for all time, all eternity. And then we can actually see with our telescopes, looking toward the first, we can see within the first 10% of the history of the universe now, we can see early galaxies that were beginning to form as the universe cooled, as matter was formed into atoms. Atoms could coalesce and be held together by gravity, forming stars. Stars themselves are little factories that create heavier elements beyond the original hydrogen and helium in the universe. And now we can look with our telescopes as a time machine and kind of look at distant galaxies. It's taken time for the light to get to us, so we can actually see what galaxies looked like in the distant past as well as in the more nearby past, and see that the universe has changed over time. For me, this is very intriguing because it shows that the universe has become more hospitable to life over billions of years of time. It's directional in that sense. We started with primitive materials and energy. Over time, the physical forces of the universe have enabled stars to form and then planets to form. At least one planet that has life that is taking advantage of these atoms and molecules that were produced in stars. And the life that fills the Earth now is robust. It's adaptive to environmental changes. It's grown more complex over time, over the history of life on Earth. And now we have life like ourselves that can have a conversation about meaning and purpose and can look back over our own history of the universe and reflect on it. Now, to me, now I'm going to switch from a scientific conversation because what I just described to you is a picture that I think most scientists would agree that we're seeing the development of the universe over time. But does that show purpose? Does that show a kind of a more philosophical or even spiritual sense of purpose? Well, that's not a science question, and scientists would have different opinions on this. But in my view, this progressive picture that we see scientifically is more consistent for me with a view that of purpose in the universe. And I believe it's quite consistent with, for me, with my Christian perspective of a God of purpose, a God of power, a God of beauty, that has purpose for a universe and for life that can actually have relationships, not only with each other, but with God. So there's a consistency there. I wouldn't say that looking at the universe scientifically would give one a proof of this kind of God, or the lack thereof, but I would also just say that for me it's more consistent than just saying that the universe is purposeless and accidental.